Welcome to the ACF Chefs Forum. Before we dive into today's webinar and an introduction to crafting non-alcoholic cocktails, we'd like to thank Thermodyne for sponsoring the session. When it comes to delivering perfectly crispy fried foods, every chef knows that timing and temperature control are everything. That's where Thermodyne's innovative precision holding cabinets come into play, offering a unique solution that goes beyond traditional cooking methods. For those unfamiliar with the American Culinary Federation, we're the leading organization for culinary professionals, offering education, certification, and a community for chefs and food service leaders. If you're not yet a member, today's webinar is a great example of the valuable resources we offer. Today, we'll be exploring the burgeoning world of conscious cocktails and non-alcoholic spirits, wines, and beers, and modifiers in this innovative session. Amy will guide us through the technique, pairings, and flavor profiles that make non-alcoholic libations as intriguing as their traditional counterparts. Whether you're exploring mindful drinking or expanding the bar's repertoire, today's webinar will offer the knowledge and creativity to craft unforgettable and unboozy cocktails. Sounds so fun. Feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function at any time. Let's get started by sharing where you're tuning in from in the chat. I'm Chris Tanner, ACF's Executive Director, and I'm excited to be here with you. Let's meet today's presenter. Amy Ward is a bartender, health coach, Executive Director of Safe Bars, founder of Health Tender, Program Director for HERD, and President of the Baltimore Bartenders Guild. Through these platforms, Amy addresses health, equity, and safety disparities in the hospitality industry by providing training, education, and unrestricted access to wellness resources. While her primary work life revolves around health advocacy for the beverage alcohol community, she's also the beverage director for Camp Runamuck. Runamuck, right? Runamuck. Okay, making sure. And serves as a judging panel for LA Spirits Awards. Amy enjoys competing in strong women competitions and relaxing at home with her two Sphinx cats, Nosferatu and Alexander. How do we say that, Amy?
It's Noferatu and Alexander Ovechkin.
Noferatu, not Nosferatu. I got that wrong. So, and also Amy and I talk every time we talk together because I compete in strongman competitions. She keeps in strong women competitions. We're going to find a competition to compete in next time, right?
Yep.
Good. All right, awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing everything from you, Amy. I really love this woman. She's doing a fantastic job for our industry. So at this time, I'm going to give her the opportunity to take it away and look forward to hearing you present.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining in today. I am really excited to be able to talk about something that I love very much and I've seen grow as a category over the last decade or so, and that's going to be non-alcoholic cocktails. So spirit-free and damn tasty. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And just, I know Chris gave the introduction, but like what makes it so I'm the person that is sitting here talking to you all today? Well, I've been heavily invested in the spirits world for a very long time. I have been in and out of the hospitality industry since I was 14 years old. It started as a dishwasher in a crab house in Edgewater, Maryland. So I'm from Baltimore. I'm here in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm from Maryland. But I have started at a young age and I've been in the industry the entire time. I love this industry. I do have a background in exercise physiology, which means I might be a glorified PE teacher to some people, but I know everything about the body. And I also work with trying to teach people in our industry how to take better care of their body so they can stay in this industry for a long time, because we all know that the setup of being on our feet all day long and some of the different physical risks that come with being in the industry does make it really difficult to last and be here a long time. So I'm always working on trying to find ways to get people to treat their bodies a little bit better here. Some of this comes into talking about non-alcoholic spirits as well. But with that, even though my background is in exercise phys, I chose to go into the bartending world full time because I like talking to strangers for a living. So I'm essentially talking to a blank screen right now, but hopefully you all will throw some questions in the chat and we'll be able to talk about everything that we're presenting today. So along with my background and being in the industry, I started an organization called the Health Tender, which was an opportunity to bring the knowledge that I have from that body health and wellness perspective and bring it to our industry to find more applicable ways to get people to take better care of their bodies. And I have been learning about non-alcoholic spirits for a long time because of what I do. because we know that what we do in the industry, especially when you're talking about the bar side of things, we're peddling poison, and that's, something that we readily accept. But trying to find other ways and alternatives to broadening our categories, changing things up a little bit. The non-alcoholic spirits have like really come into that forefront and taken precedent over the last couple of years. So I had an opportunity a couple of years ago to join on to the LA Spirits Awards panel as a judge, and I judged specifically the non-alcoholic category. So I have seen a lot of different things come in, good products, bad products, everywhere in between, and I'm seeing the category grow, seeing everything really take off, and finding different ways that we can implement these things into all of our programs, no matter where you are in the restaurant. So that's a little bit about me. And then, I'm here just like helping things out in Baltimore, doing my thing, loving life. And that last thing, the Camp Run Amok portion of it, I help usher in 400 new bartenders to learn about the whiskey distillation process at Camp Run Amok every single year. I run the beverage program, which means while they're out learning about how to distill whiskey, I am making all the cocktails for all their events that they have during the week. I batch out at least 20,000 cocktails each of the 2 weeks that camp happens, and at least half of those are non-alcoholic too. So got some experience here and would love to be able to share that with you today. So why is the non-alcoholic category such a big thing to talk about right now? Why are we talking about conscious cocktails? Why are all these things taking over and taking, leading the charge? And there's a couple different reasons. First and foremost, stigmas and the world, right? So sobriety and mindful drinking and those stigmas are trending downwards. There has been, most of the things that we love in this world, I think, get McDonaldized. Hopefully that's an okay assessment to say on here, but like when we're talking about self-care and wellness and things like that are very important to me in my background, I see them turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And that's a little frustrating because I think people gloss over what it really means to have some kind of wellness plan for yourself and be able to care for yourself and know like what your body's telling you. But one of the positive things that's happened is in the same part with self-care and discussions about mental health, it has been so largely put into the forefront of our spaces that now we're talking about mental health and self-care on a regular basis. And whether it's, being profitized off of in a lot of different ways, we are talking about it. And with that mental health discussion has come being able to reevaluate our relationship with alcohol. So people are becoming more comfortable talking about what alcohol does and does not do for them. And people are feeling more comfortable being able to re-examine their relationship with alcohol and stop drinking if it doesn't serve them. So we're seeing sobriety come to the forefront of a lot of different discussions without the same stigma that was attached to it many years ago. We're seeing people in our industry specifically, where there is access to excess 24/7, being more comfortable, being sober and talking about it and being able to still stay in this industry and thrive, like, because alcohol doesn't have to be a part of it. So we have a lot of different things in terms of that mindful drinking and sobriety that are going, those stigmas are going to the side. So it's becoming more accessible for people to not have to drink. We also know that we don't necessarily want to drink and fuel the other gestures wildly to the world, things that are happening right now. So people want to make more healthy choices. People want to have better relationships with alcohol. People want to have better relationships with themselves. And we're seeing a lot of that happen, which is a beautiful, beautiful piece. The other part is going to be everything's being driven by Gen Z. All of the numbers that we have right now are telling us that people are drinking less. So one study that I found, one of many, many studies. So there's a lot of different ways in which we can approach the discussion and the stats that are going on to here. One of them shows that 62% of people under 35 are still drinking, still imbibing, going out to spaces and enjoying drinks, which is down 72% over the last 2 decades. That is huge. We have 30% of college-age drinkers. College-age students are not drinking, not reporting that. Gen Z is driving the traffic here. Gen Z is driving the ship that says we don't like to drink. We they had an opportunity to grow up for a large portion during the pandemic, where being at home, being in community, and being without necessarily the presence of binge drinking, which is a very common thing that we do see in college age students, they find other ways to amuse themselves other than drinking. So, right, this is not the biggest trend that we're seeing anymore, where people are buying alcohol at rapid rates. They're finding other ways to enjoy themselves that don't involve alcohol. So Gen Z is driving this ship and telling us that they are not drinking that much. And so people need to adapt. We see that part in the revenue, where they're, I can personally tell you from seeing in the beverage alcohol side of things, there have been so many different shifts in different distributors, portfolios, all the brands and spirits that we see. Like, people are reorging a lot, and a lot of people are losing jobs because they're not bringing in the same revenue that they were. Non-alcoholic industry is a $11 billion industry as of 2022. So that's 2 years post. We're almost into the third year post that measure. And there are better products that are coming out. There are more variety. Like, we're seeing great opportunities and great entries in the wine category that are really nice. The spirits and the beer world were kind of the first to take on for that, and now wine's really getting behind it, and there's good things going on there. Up from 2022, in 23, we saw there was a 32% increase in non-alcoholic sales compared to 1% increase for the alcohol sales. So it's happening. We are fully in it. It's been happening and trending this way for a while, and now we are fully in the non-alcoholic revolution. So there's a lot of different ways in which people are, deciding to drink non-alcoholic, like whether it's something that you're doing all the time and you're no longer drinking and you're becoming sober, and that's freaking awesome, or it's just something that you're using to parse in between rounds or whatever it might be. There's a lot of great things that are happening here. So we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you the kind of the breakdown of how wine, beer, and spirits that are non-alcoholic are made. And there's still a lot of different varieties, and there's a lot of trade secrets that people are not releasing, and that's okay, as this is a growing field that people are making lots of money off of. So I get it. But I'm going to go over a couple different ways in which we're seeing the production happen, just so you can get an understanding of that part. And then when we're talking about this category, more than likely, we're calling this all-encompassing as NA, non-alcoholic. But here is what the actual two categories stand for. So you might be hearing the words alcohol-free, which means that we're looking at 0 to 0.05 ABV. So the alcohol content that's in a liquid substance, or non-alcoholic, which is 0.5 ABV or less. Many things fall into the non-alcoholic category, but there are quite a few products that are entirely alcohol-free. So we'll talk about that, and then we're going to talk about how to actually craft, how to serve wine, talk a little bit about beer, but beer is kind of like a really flexible and plays really well with a lot of different opportunities in the food world. And then considerations for when we're building our non-alcoholic cocktails, because if anybody in this space is someone that's a bartender who works with spirits on a regular basis, we cannot build our cocktails the same way that we did in the NA sphere as we do for the alcoholic sphere. And it will make or break your ability to put a really delicious cocktail on the menu, be able to charge the correct price for it, and be able to make, have like a decent cost percentage for it. So we'll talk a little bit about those things there. So first up, we're going to be talking about wine and the dealcoholization process that it goes through. So if you understand how wine is made, then you will be able to understand the adaptation for non-alcoholic wine itself. So to understand the difference between alcoholic wines and alcohol-free wines, we need to know that it goes through the processes of regular winemaking, which is crushing the grapes, fermenting the grapes, and then aging the grapes. So dealcoholization for wine happens during that last step, like before the aging process happens. So we'll see that there will be like the harvesting, crushing of grapes, the fermentation, and then when we're getting to that aging process, we've got these different options, plus a little bit more that people can use to de-alcoholize things. So one of them is the spinning cones, where they will take the alcohol, take the wine that's been fermented, and it'll be spinning at a very fast rate, and it will remove the alcohol while leaving the grape solids and the flavor, so people can use that to continue processing and making their wine alternative that they have there. We have vacuum distillation, which you'll see in a lot of different processes. They're going to be in all of these across the board when we're talking about wine, beer, and spirits, where that's using heat to evaporate most of the alcohol off of it. So this is going to be something that's going to be in that lower alcohol level, so there will still be trace amounts. And when, like, backpedaling a little bit here, when we were talking about non-alcoholic and alcohol-free, those categories are really important because people have different relationships with alcohol. So it's always important as you're thinking through these things, if it's not already on your menu, if you're someone who's in charge of a menu and putting these things on there, having the actual percentage listed next to the product is going to be really important so people can make informed choices about what they're going to be consuming at that time. So do not think that 0.05 versus 0.5 is a negligible thing, because it's very important for most of us. So make sure you have those things listed on there, and all the products that you're going to be purchasing do have the correct percentage, ABV percentage, listed on those things. For reverse osmosis, we're using high pressure filtration systems to separate the ethanol from the wine, and that keeps some of that profile intact. And then something completely different will be something called blending. And I think everybody has, a lot of people who have proprietary distinctions of what they're calling their process might call these different things. But I'm calling it blending as a holistic thing that says we're not taking the actual process of making, the process of making wine is out the door. So a group like Proxies, which I'm sure people have definitely heard of because they've been on for a little bit longer than most, they will blend the flavors. So they'll blend like their herbs, spices, aromatic roots, teas, grape juices, and they'll achieve what kind of flavor profile they're looking for before they bottle. So they're not using any alcohol. So this will be absolutely alcohol-free. There's no alcohol whatsoever. Making sure that there's not even a de-alcoholization process that has to start for those kinds of things. I'm curious if anybody in this group has any favorite non-alcoholic wines they've started with so far. I personally love bubbles. So removing wine from my world really was kind of hard, because I love non-alcoholic. I love bubbles so much. I love champagne. I love sparkling wine. And I finally started finding a couple different brands that I really love that do have that really beautiful tight bubble that's on there. One of them is called Oddbird. I have some things listed out here towards the end of like different brands that people can try perusing. But I love that. I was so happy once I found something that absolutely replaced it, that wasn't like super sweet and tasted like sparkling apple juice to me. So these processes are all done, and then it is that aging process that will happen, which is done to change that flavor of the bouquet of the wine. So like they're kept in bottles, stainless steel tanks, oak barrels. There's a lot of still the same processes for making regular wine that are still in place for wine when we're going to there. Next up, we're going to be talking about beer. So lots and lots and lots of different ways for us to make beer. And again, there's a lot of proprietary steps that people are starting to use right now, so where they don't have the process of alcohol, like actual beer making isn't even a part of it. They're using it, but there's no fermentation that's happening whatsoever. So it doesn't have any alcohol that needs to be removed. We'll also see that there's a lot more in the ways of categories for beer, where they still have their alcohol-free, they're non-alcoholic. Then there is a low alcohol, and then traditional beer, which will be a 1.2% ABV or more. Your lower alcohols are probably what more beer brands were doing prior to getting onto the NA train, where you would see like there's a lot, like anything that would say low, and that would be their introduction of a very low alcohol beer without completely de-alcoholizing it. Anyways, Couple different processes that are used here, and again, some other ones that have not been released as they are considered trade secrets at this point in time. But we have reverse osmosis, which is basically just filtration. So it's a really fine filter, microscopic filter, where the fermented beer is pushed through that process, and the alcohol molecules are separated out. And then what they have left over is that water, and then they might, depending on the ABV, add additional water and flavoring to it to get the correct ABV and the flavor profile that they're looking for. There's always dilution is always an option for all the different things, including wine. Like dilution is an available thing that can be done. If they have a low ABV wine, they'll add water to get to the ABV that they want. When it's just dilution, you're not getting any of those flavor profiles that are added into it. So we don't talk about it too much just because it's not what people tend to rely on. Dilution, again, is something that's available to the beer world, and I'm sure we've tasted some of the most watered down beers in the world, and shockingly, they still have pretty high ABV in them. Anyhow, so dilution always as an option. We have vacuum distillation, which is, again, using that heat to evaporate out most of the alcohol of the beer, leaving only trace amounts of alcohol. That will probably be something that's going to be in your low or NA category for them. Then we have simulated fermentation and arrested fermentation. So the fermentation is a process where the sugars eat up, sugars are basically converted into alcohol. So for simulated fermentation, this avoids the actual fermentation of the sugars by the addition of different enzymes. Different things are added to give the same effect without having the conversion from sugars to alcohol. Then there is also arrested fermentation, which is using a low temp process to basically halt the process of converting those sugars into alcohol and keeping that wort at that lower level so they can use that product afterwards. So lots of different things about beer and the way that they can be made. There's other ones that there's a couple other groups that are making beer in a completely different way, but they're not sharing how they do it because we see this burgeoning industry that's growing and the money that's behind it. So they're not feeling very open to sharing those products with them. I can tell you for certain that the vacuum distillation and that reverse osmosis, those different processes and like the centrifuge process are super expensive. So everybody is trying to find different ways that they can economically make these products and make it be a proprietary thing. So they're not sharing their, magical wares with the rest of the world in this very lucrative field that's coming up here. When it comes to spirits, this is the big ranging category of all like liquors that we're looking at, right? So if anybody is not familiar with in this room about how liquors are made, we are looking to get ethanol out of things when we're making spirits. So distillation is all about getting ethanol. So we ferment sugars with yeast, and then we take that liquid that is there and then put it through a distillation process so that the liquid that's in there can get converted into ethanol vapors and condense it into liquids that we can actually consume. That is what it can be done through column still. It can be done through pot still. There's a lot of different ways that can be done that. And a lot of spirit categories that are in the non-alcoholic world are doing the same exact thing. So sometimes they will just distill the alcohol out of a liquid. So it could be fermented liquid, could be other liquids that go into the still, turn the ethanol into the vapor. This is when it is actually a fermented one, and condense it into a high ethanol liquid and water. And that liquid goes back in to be able to get turned into a spirit. But that water that's left over is what most people are utilizing. They're taking that water that comes off of that still, the waste essentially, and they're using that to go through the other processes that are listed on here to add in different flavors. So in a vapor infusion, they might take that distilled spirit, that distilled water that's come off the still, and heat it into a vapor, passing it back through once again, but being able to pass it through different flavors so that it picks up those flavors that they're trying to achieve and turns that into a non-alcoholic spirit. Same thing could be maceration. So taking that water that's come off the still, we've got the ethanol, it's being turned into alcohol, but we've got the water that's left over. And then that can go through a maceration process, which is just like where I wrote up here, tea. So think about steeping it with ingredients that are trying to help you achieve a specific flavor. And then they will get that desired flavor profile at the end of the day. There are, same thing, cold pressing. So what else does this particular group, I'm sure, do know about the process of cold pressing? You're doing the same exact thing here, where it's compressing those flavoring ingredients and then adding it into that zero proof distilled spirit so that people can, again, achieving the specific flavor that we're looking for right then. And then there's percolation as well, which is not using specifically like raw ingredients. This is specifically using tinctures and mashes that they would pass that water, that distilled water, that distilled spirit leftovers through the percolation process to be able to draw out the deep flavors from those oils, from the tinctures and the mashes that are being used as part of that. Then there are other groups that do not do distillation of actual fermented liquids in here at all. They will distill a tea and water mixture to try to concentrate flavors and be able to get that same flavor product there too. So a lot of people start with no alcohol whatsoever. They do not need to distill off the alcohol. They'll have that non-alcoholic base and then keep adding different things to achieve the flavor and the kind of, aromatics and things that we're trying to get to. This is definitely not all encompassing in terms of like wine, beer, and spirits, because there's, again, a lot of different proprietary things that are happening in this world that are allowing people to experiment with how they're producing these different non-alcoholic products that we're able to get our hands on and play with. But if anybody has questions about those, I will definitely try to answer them to the best of my abilities, knowing that there is a lot of different ways in which people can do things and go from there. So how do we serve the non-alcoholic products that we're working with? When it comes to wine, there are, no joke, for any of these things I'm talking about today, there's a lot of cruddy products that are out there, and then there are some really good ones too. We need to be tasting through and trying to find the right wines that are working for the specific, whatever we're trying to achieve with the menu that we're working with, right? Sometimes wines either come out really sweet or potentially really vinegary, depending on if they are something that started with like a vinegar base on it. So you need to be conscientious of that. We can, for those different things, for something that is too sweet of a wine, you can add bitters to them. So dashing bitters, the things that we use for our cocktails, and there are non-alcoholic bitters that are around. Like one of the companies I use the most is All the Bitters. You can put a couple dashes of their bitters if you want to keep it purely NA. You can also use more glycerin-based ones like Fee Brothers that will have like the lowest level of ABV in them to achieve this. Otherwise, bitters are compressed alcohol, so we do need to be conscientious of that. You can add a couple dashes of bitters to your wines to achieve the profile that you're looking for. Conversely, if you don't have that sweet wine, but you have one that has more of a vinegar base or a vinegar taste, or tastes like you're drinking vinegar, you could add if you do have too sweet of something, you could also add like those vinegar, a little bit of dash of vinegar to be able to achieve the same thing that you're looking for, because vinegar can help improve that sweetness, the balance, the texture, and the bite that you're getting for it. I'm going to skip over pairing it for just a second, but non-alcoholic wines have to breathe and have to be aerated. Treat them the same exact way that you do your regular ones, unless you're working with a bubbles, a non-alcoholic bubble. They need aeration. They need to be experienced in the same way that our regular alcoholic wines do. And that's because, again, that lack of ethanol, the absence of ethanol is what removes the experience on our palates that we're used to when we imbibe with regular alcoholic products. So all of these things are related to how they're going to hit. If they're not like covering our mouth in the same way that a normal alcoholic spirit will, then we're not going to get that same experience on the palate that we're used to. That smell, that taste, the thing that triggers pieces of our memory that allows us to actually experience what we're imbibing and eating at the same time. So aeration is going to be really necessary for this to be able to give some kind of like quality and like body and moving of those products back around in our mouth. Sometimes some wines that are non-alcoholic do need to be opened and left open for a while in order, they need to breathe in the same way that a big red would, right? And then when it comes to pairing your wines, you can keep with the traditional route of what a specific style would pair with, but we need to lean in. I would strongly suggest trying to lean into something that is more robust in flavor. So what's on that of the different things that can pair with a red, you know, instead of just doing like chocolate, how about like a really dark, like high percentage dark chocolate to go with that? Or, you know, you could pair it with certain meats, but why not lean into something that's more fatty and something that has more texture and mouthfeel and experience in itself to have it complement together. So this is your opportunity to play with much bolder flavors than what you're probably used to for that. And that goes for, I know I just made red as the example, but what you know for pairing with whites and what you know with pairing with rosés and reds and all the different bubbles, lean into them, but go into the weirder side of things. Like try using some of those more intense flavors that you have not been able to get away with beforehand, because they're going to lend something a little bit more to a product that in science falls flat because there is a lack of ethanol in there. I was going to put a slide in here for beer, but beer, because it is carbonated, works out really well for all of us. It's really just trying the multitude of different beers that NA beers that are in existence and finding which one is going to serve its purpose for your menu. Most of them, again, carbonation really helps cover up some of the muck, some of the flavors or some of the imperfections that come with having a non-alcoholic product. So, but I do find that beer is a bit more forgiving for these things. But figure out, like, are you trying to have something that's going to be lighter, you know, lighter beers that are all around? Are you trying to go for some things that are more IPA heavy? Are you looking for darker beers? There are a lot in the category now that you can taste through. And I really just suggest trying to find the one that is going to appeal to the menu and what you're serving on there. There's some NA beers that fall a little bit flat, but I find it's more in the non-alcoholic ready to drink category versus the beers that fall flat. I think the beer category is really, really strong. I think that's why people are not releasing a lot of their proprietary directions for how they're producing these things, because they're really tasty. We're also watching like all the other microbreweries that are around. A lot of them are folding. The ones that are producing alcoholic beers are not surviving because NA beers are crushing it right now. When it comes to building non-alcoholic cocktails, this is my happy place. Non-alcoholic cocktails I do not think should be approached in the same way that their alcoholic counterparts are. That is, again, first and foremost, because the absence of ethanol completely changes the experience of what you're doing with the non-alcoholic cocktail itself. So I find that the best thing to do for this is to build backwards instead of using your base spirit and trying to build something off of an incredible whiskey, an incredible rum, an incredible gin, or whatever it might be. Build the opposite way. What are you trying to achieve at the end of the day? Is this something, are you just looking for something that's a big tropical drink that might mimic like a Jungle Bird, if I have any Jungle Bird fans that are in here? Are you looking for that bold tropical creation that has that bitterness to it? Are you looking for something that would replace like a Vesper or a standard martini or an espresso martini or an old fashioned? Think about what you're trying to achieve. And if it's something that you're trying to achieve that pairs with a specific dish, think about what it is that you want to achieve and then work backwards from there, because the flavors don't always correspond the same exact way when you're building a non-alcoholic cocktail. So work backwards, figure out what you're trying to achieve, and then that will tell you what the right ingredients are and flavors that you're trying to put in from the different spirits that exist in this world. The other thing that comes into play because of that absence of ethanol is dilution. So we cannot shake and stir cocktails in the same way that we did when we're building alcoholic creations. dilution is the enemy, essentially. So if you're if you're trying to shake and stir the same exact way you would for an alcoholic creation in your non-alcoholic cocktail, it's going to fall flat. It's going to completely be a limp cocktail that's not going to be a really pleasing experience for the people who are ingesting it. So think about tasting the cocktail at the end before dilution goes in there. How do you like it? Does it need just a tinge? I suggest being able to have either the exact amount of water that you want to add to something in order to achieve the final product, or batching out the cocktail and adding in that dilution that you're trying to get to ahead of time, and then chilling it in the fridge before it's served. Or if it doesn't need any kind of dilution whatsoever, same thing, keep the product in the fridge so it can be chilled and can be served and done in a normal process at the restaurant. This is your opportunity to, if you have access for it, those big cubes, things with larger surface area that melt a lot slower than hotel ice or smaller ice cubes, that's going to be your opportunity to use those. I know that's not entirely accessible all the time. So think about batching out the cocktail, bottling it up, putting it in the fridge for quick access, or you can do single serve bottle cocktails. That could be something where the presentation portion of it still is something that is pleasing to the guest that's about to imbibe with it. But again, caution on dilution, just it doesn't work the same way as alcoholic cocktails. There's not a lot that you need to add in for that dilution. You could also, if you're worried about aeration for a cocktail, if you're looking for something with more texture and bubbles and fizziness and things like that, you can play around with different soda waters that you can add. You can also dry shake non-alcoholic cocktails as long as they're chilled ahead of time and going to be served at the right temperature that you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. You can dry shake, you can use shaker balls that you would find in like your blender bottles. Those things will all help achieve aeration without necessarily having to add the dilution in at the same time. So be cautious about your dilution. And if you really need to add dilution, but something is missing, think about using teas. Think about using an oversteeped tea or some other kind of flavored water that is not just plain water, so that doesn't make the drink fall flat. Let it add something to it. Once again, ethanol, 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 it's the thing that I'm talking about nonstop today, is mouthfeel. So mouthfeel takes a ding when you're working with non-alcoholic products. Again, there's the lack of ethanol, so there's a lack of mouthfeel that is going to be in that particular spirit. If anybody in this group has played with a lot of non-alcoholic spirits, you know that there are some that stand up on their own and could be sipped by themselves because that's how they were created. And there are other ones that are there, but they're lacking something and do better when they are mixed and mingled with something else that makes it pop. So be familiar with what you're working with so you know, again, trying to find that back end overall achievement of what you're trying to get to, and then getting the right ingredients in place for it. Mouthfeel. Mouthfeel is going to be such a big thing no matter what products you're using. So we want to be able to lend and add back in mouthfeel that will likely be missing from the product itself because it doesn't have ethanol. So you could play with different textures, making something feel more dry or stringent, being able to add sweetness in, and like with a rich syrup that could help round something out. You can always play with different hydrocolloids to amp up the cocktail that you're doing. Again, this will be something where probably batching the cocktail at the end of the day will serve you best when you're playing in and adding a little bit of science to this. Using eggs and aquafaba to give that kind of rich texture. Adding vanilla can also give that texture as well. Fat washing or using fatty ingredients, complementary ingredients to be able, or having a very fatty dish that you're serving something with, or something with really heavy umami that can like lend itself to an experience and a mouthfeel that's missing from the product itself because of the absence of ethanol. I am a huge get weird person. I like using not normal ingredients in my cocktails that I generally wouldn't see, just because I think it's fun and I like to see what they can do. And in this space for non-alcoholic, it plays really well. So barbecue, mustard, soy sauce, jellies and jams, things that you can already just like saying those words out loud, you're salivating, right? You can recall what the experience is on your mouth when those things touch your palate. Those are some things that you could add to have fun with your non-alcoholic spirits to be able to lend something a little bit different. You can also take every single scrap that you have in the kitchen. Think about what you're producing lots of waste of. You could use those as ways to just like macerate, steep with your products that you're using, or the end cocktail that you're using, and see if those things would add on something else. Any kind of peels. You know, I'm not sure what everybody is working with. It's interesting when you're talking to a room of people that are not in front of you to see like who's nodding their heads and thinking about what they would actually be utilizing. But there's lots of different ways we can play here. So you're getting weird also extends to being able to use your acids to your benefit, right? So maybe we don't use regular citrus, or maybe you're also a group that uses citrus stock in your space. Being able to add lactic acid so you can get that mouthfeel without really distorting the level of acidity that's in that in the citruses that you're using. You could add something like that to add a little mouthfeel. Steeping things in rice, adding milk powder, rich simple syrups, whatever it might be, you can use all those different little back end tricks to add some full character to round out the entire cocktail itself. And then pair accordingly. Same thing, like if you are using, if you're trying to make an old fashioned, if they're whatever you would normally pair with your old fashioned for food wise in the specific space, like there's a very long range of things that would pair with whiskeys, but like do the same thing, like pair with your whiskeys what would normally go with whiskeys. Pair with your non-alcoholic whiskey, pair with your non-alcoholic rum, your non-alcoholic gin, whatever the spirit, tequila, whatever it might be. All of those things could be utilized in the same way with their flavor pairings. But again, I encourage you to kind of lean in hard to the more esoteric, the things that are a little bit more outlandish, the things that are a little bit more polarizing in flavors, because they will add something to these riffs on a spirit that aren't going to taste exactly like the spirit that you're envisioning at that time. Pair and lean in heavy as much as you can. This is a very non-exhaustive list of different like products that are available, but I wanted to get you all thinking about what you could be using and starting to think about and Googling and approaching when you're tasting spirits. If you're bringing something into your restaurant, or you're bringing something into your home for personal enjoyment, like there's a lot of different ways to go off of here. The spirits that are listed out here, definitely not all encompassing, but you've got Ritual Zero Proof, which I do a ton of work with. I love them. They have, you know, they're really trying to get you to rethink what your ritual is when you're drinking. I appreciate some decent marketing too. You've got Clean & Co, Fluaire, Giffard just released this past year their first four. They have their first four core of their non-alcoholics, which are, you're going to have like pamplemousse for their pamplemousse, but pineapple for their pineapple, and there's ginger, and I can't think right now. I think that might be it, actually, just those three. I'm probably wrong. Sorry, brain's not working right now. They also have bitters, a non-alcoholic bitter syrup that you can utilize too. Plus their orgeat is non-alcoholic, just the same. Orgeat is generally made with alcohol, so it's important to keep that in mind. We have Seedlip, which is probably one of the early adoptions that people made. It doesn't taste like a lot by itself, but once you start adding acids and different things to it, it brings out the flavor characteristics that they're doing. They distill each of their botanicals individually and then merge them and meld them back together to achieve the flavors that they want. You have the Pathfinder, which is one of the coolest. It's a hemp-based product that is basically our first drinking bitters that we've seen that is for NA. So if you love, my personal Instagram handle is Bitters Queen, whereas otherwise I am the health tender. So I love bitters. So being able to have something like that is a nice bitter liqueur alternative is really nice. Lyre's has a bunch of different products, Janista, Everleaf, Wilderton. Wilderton actually like brews tea and then distills it to get what they're trying to achieve. So they don't have any alcohol whatsoever. And then here is a couple different Wines that are out there, lots of different fun ones for the Oddbird is my favorite. Oddbird, Lates, and Naughty are really fun. RTDs, ready to drinks. So these are ones that they have put the drinks in a cocktail. They've made their cocktail, they put it in a can, and it's ready for you to have a single serve and go. So the list for the RTDs is far more extensive than this, but those are just some of the ones that are really fun to play with. And then beers, again, way more than what's listed out here, but I wanted to be able to talk about the first half of these are all, lots of independent breweries that are making their non-alcoholics. But if you are a tried and true, or if you're in a place that's like, I don't know how we're going to make this work, we're a dive bar, or our clientele would never allow these things in, they're Coors drinkers, or they're Miller drinkers, or they're Bud drinkers, or whatever. Well, those people are already doing those things for us as well. So we have Miller Coors, who has Blue Moon's probably their newest one that just came out. There's Peroni, there's Coors Edge, which Chris and I were talking about earlier, has been around forever. Anheuser-Busch has Bud Zero, Busch NA, Michelob Ultra Zero, Beck's, O'Doul's, Stella. So those names that people come in and just ask for it by name, just the same way that you're asking for a Kleenex, even though there's plenty of tissue brands. Those things exist. And then some of our other not quite mega breweries, but like Sierra Nevada, Sam Adams, Corona, Guinness, Heineken, Brooklyn, Lagunitas, Deschutes all make NAs. So there's a lot of different options that are out there. So if you're a person who runs a restaurant and is thinking like, how are we actually going to implement this? There's a lot of name brand things in here that people will be able to recognize and feel comfort with. So especially I'm thinking like those spaces where you have like the Bud drinkers, the Michelob Ultra drinkers, the Sam Adams drinkers, things like that. There are alternatives for people to have. And you're not going to know that people want them or feel necessarily comfortable asking for them until you start putting them on your menu. So I definitely want to encourage everybody to really think about adding some of these on. And now I've just been talking forever. So what questions do we have?
We've got a handful here. So that was awesome, by the way, Amy. I really enjoyed that. So some questions we got here. What are the most common mistakes restaurants make when trying to expand their non-alcoholic offerings, and what can we do to avoid them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think number one, not listening to what your guests want. Kind of being able to look at what is selling on your PMix, like understanding what is actually selling in your spaces is tantamount to anything else. And then bringing in the appropriate products is going to be one of the first things I would always recommend. I also think that when we put a separate section of non-alcoholic on a menu, that can be pretty polarizing for people. So I always encourage people to find a way, just fold the drinks in, fold the wines in, fold the beers in into the regular list, and just put a designation of whether it's a non-alcoholic or if you want to put your ABV on there, that's also a perfectly fine way. I think because we're not completely stigma-free in this world, having a separate section for that NA could potentially be more stigmatizing to people who aren't ready or aren't, there with their they aren't fully there with their relationship with alcohol to make it a public thing. So making it very much folded into the regular menu is an A+ move in my.
What I like about that too is, as you mentioned, that so many times you see some of the wines, although you have non-alcoholic Chardonnays and Merlots and stuff, those are kind of easy to identify the flavor profiles, but it's not always easy to identify the flavor profiles of all the different things that are out there. So if you mix them in, and especially the cocktails and whatnot, that makes a whole lot of sense. I've never thought of that, but I like that a lot, particularly me not drinking and doing the same thing. I want to fit in with everybody else, and that's one of the reasons why I ended up doing this. So I love it. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
All right, next one. We got, can you help us identify where to best purchase NA beers, wines, and spirits?
Yeah, so one of the nice things is that NA does not have to go through the same TTB processes that regular alcohol does. So start with going to the website first of the product that you're looking at, or hopefully you're knowing what it is. And if that's my email right there. So if anybody has a specific product that they're looking for or a style, shout out and I will get it for you. A lot of times these products are going to be direct to consumer. So there is that beautiful loophole where you don't have to necessarily deal with your distributors. And then at the same time, there are products that are getting really big that do want distribution because self-distribution isn't necessarily an option anymore. So most of them are very good about telling you, like, we are in this distributor in these states, otherwise we are self-distributing. Because the self-distributing stuff you can get through their website itself, or you're going to find it on Amazon if you're okay with shopping through there.
Cool. All right, next one. What would you tell chefs who are unsure if they should expand their menu to include spirit-free drinks?
Do it. That's what I say. It really is, it's really important. I think number one, for your guests, number two, for your staff. You never know if there's somebody on your staff who might not explicitly be telling you that they're not drinking, so they might not be saying no to shift drinks that are being offered at the end of the day, or whatever you might be giving them access to while at the space. Try it out. I promise that you all will be absolutely blown away by the number of people who order the non-alcoholic product, because it doesn't have to be a person who's completely sober and we want things for them, but there's other people who are the DDs of the night, who are the people who are just like not feeling it but want to be social. Or you have the me's of the world. I'm social anxiety queen. Like, I need to have something in my hand when I'm at a space, and I don't always want it to be alcoholic, but I also don't want to have a plain water, and I don't drink Coke, Pepsi, soda. I don't drink soda. Like, so put it on there.
Or it's always the Pellegrino and that's what I always used to have in the past is Pellegrino. I don't want to just keep drinking water. So
Yeah. I like flavors too.
yeah.
So yeah. But in all honesty, if you put that on your menu, and you're going to quickly see where there's an opportunity for you to start adding in products that you have in the back that could be complementing what's going out in the front. There's a really big opportunity for teamwork, because I do believe that there's far more culinary work that goes into crafting a non-alcoholic spirit. Again, because we're trying to talk about starting from the back end of the experience and the flavors that you're trying to capture. That's a chef brain right there. And not all bartenders are thinking that way. So it could be a really nice opportunity for collaboration between front and back of house too.
Well, I'm sure you remember about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they started talking about chef tenders as well at one point.
Yeah.
So I think some of that stuff kind of filled out. But one of the things so I went to the NRA show last year, and I went to oh gosh, what's Grant Achatz cocktail restaurant that he has?
Yeah, brains.
You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, he came out with the book Zero, and
Yes.
so many of us chefs are used to cooking out of Grant Achatz books or some of the other books, and I really found it interesting to make some of the spirit-free, the alcohol-free spirits myself. So, and they're cooked through sous vide, because of course it's Grant Achatz, you got to do sous vide. So the bourbon is made through a sous vide method, and I think if you like or don't like certain aspects of it too, as you mentioned, can I use some of the scraps? Can I throw some of my other things into when I'm making bourbon? There's a perfect example of that. So for me, to all of you of saying, go get that Zero book, particularly for chefs. I think that's a great attribute to work along with your bartender as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And then they even have, I think they have a 5-course tasting menu, and it's the same price, non-alcoholic and that's another thing. I'm not sure. I apologize if you mentioned it. A lot of people will talk about, well, it has no alcohol in it. It shouldn't cost as much as a drink with alcohol in it. It takes just as much work, if not more work, to make a spirit-free cocktail, and just as much work to make the non-alcoholic beers, which I complained about at first too, but Go Brewing is the one that you and I have talked about numerous times. It's $4 for one of those beers, which is the same price as getting a regular beer. Expect the same quality coming out of it. So
Yeah, they're using the same distillation methods. Like, we're talking about the vacuum distillation or any kind of like centrifuge. That piece of equipment that can be used for both things, that are used for both things, are expensive as hell. So it is the same production, and because they're trying to use fresh ingredients to be able to create these things without making something that's like super glycerin heavy or super fake flavors, like, you have to use real products. You have to use the real machinery to make it work. So yeah, it's going to cost the same.
I got another question here. Can you point us towards some resources for creating conscious cocktails?
Yeah, conscious cocktails. So first, what does conscious cocktails mean to you, right? So are you trying to do something where you're being conscientious about the products that you're bringing into your space? Are you trying to do something where you're making a low ABV cocktail? Figure out what works for figure out what you're trying to achieve and then try to work backwards for that. I know I'm always the worst with that because I'm like, you got to think it through first and then take the steps to get there. But it's really important because it can mean something different for everybody. Mindfulness is for the self. So if you're trying to make a mindful approach to making cocktails, if you're trying to be conscious about the way in which you're making cocktails, it's a very personalized experience. So figure out if you're doing it for you. Are you doing it for your guests? What is going to be, what is going to achieve your goals and appease the people that you're trying to go after in the first place? But, you know, if you want something super simple, if you're trying to like figure out what you normally like to drink, if you like something that's bright and citrusy, then we can look at some of the products that are associated with that and replicating some of those flavors. If you're someone that wants to replace a portion of the alcohol that you're normally consuming and you're making a split base between a whiskey and a non-alcoholic whiskey, that can be an approach that you have. It's hard for me to give a distinct answer for that because it is a personal preference, personal experience. And then when it comes to your restaurant, think about what is going to benefit the restaurant most. What can utilize products that you already have? What can utilize the relationships that you already have? What new relationships can you start with different vendors and producers that would benefit your restaurant as a whole? Sorry.
Would you have any websites or books or something that you could point them in the direction to just for recipes? Because obviously they're chefs, so a lot of them like to go to those sources. So I mentioned Zero as one of the opportunities, one of the ones I like. Zero is very complicated, by the way, just so you know, chefs. So if you're looking for something that's complicated, Zero is that book for complication. But do you have any other thoughts on that, Amy?
Yeah, aside from things like Zero, I like Zero Proof Nation is a great great website that has a lot of stuff. I can probably give you a quick list of some websites that you can share if that's
yeah. If you send it to me after the session, and we can send it out as a post email to everyone who's on here.
Yeah, not a problem for that. Sorry for cats.
Not a problem. Well, that's our last question, Amy. You got any other thoughts to close out with?
Yeah, just be open to exploring this new world. I assure you that we are trending here for the majority. This is not going to change. So be open to the idea of bringing in a zero proof program to your space if you have the opportunity to do so, and really just get weird and creative. I am a firm believer that this is a brand new category of cocktail creation as well, where we're looking at reinventing a lot of stuff because we have the opportunity to, not because it's going to make it more complicated. So have fun with it. I really love this category, and I think it's going to be super impactful for everybody for years to come.
Yeah, and that's personally a trend that I like a lot because it's a lot of fun to me, and it's obviously on trend, which is why we're talking about it with the ACF. But personally, it means a lot to me too. And truly, this was a great presentation, Amy. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
All right. And we're definitely, if just so everyone knows, you're going to see Amy again at the national convention, and I'm sure we're going to see her other places too. So you probably won't see her in the pumpkin colors you're seeing right now that you're going to see for Halloween tomorrow, but we'll be seeing her again soon. So thank you, Amy, for taking the time, and looking forward to seeing you again. And you and I better compete sometime soon in another strong person competition. So
very, very soon.
All right. Well, thanks again for all of you, and thank you to today's webinar sponsor, Thermodyne. Please be on the lookout for the survey you'll receive after the next day or so, which you'll need to complete to get your continuing education hours. We hope you'll all join us in our next webinar on November 20th as Chef Kurt presents a mashup of global flavors in honor of November's trend. Then on December 4th, Clyde Tanner will be revisiting our trend of global pantry, but with a holiday twist. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, visit acfchefs.org and click on the events tab. On behalf of the ACF National Office, thank you again to our presenter, Amy, for bringing us this opportunity, and thank you all of you for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.